Welcome back everyone, Patrick here, moving on to another video dealing with factoring by decomposition. So we have to factor these examples over here, and notice that in this specific case what we're going to be working with is a negative c value. Now these two here are positive, but once we factor out the negative, those would turn negative as well. So we're going to be working with a negative c value for all of these, and then the b value is going to be a mix of negatives and positives. So in videos before this one, we dealt with cases where the b value was positive and then the c value was positive. We also dealt with the b value being negative, the c value being positive. Now the c value is going to be negative and the b value is going to be a mix of positive and negative. So notice be aware of the different types of cases that we're going through here. And you have to be comfortable with all of these. Basically, any of these can come up on a test. So same exact process is going to apply for all of these. So let's say with 3x squared minus x minus 10, first thing we always check for, can we take out a greatest common factor? Notice in this case we can't. And so let's see if this will factor by decomposition. So the a value is 3, the b value is -1, the c value is -10. Then what we do is we multiply the a and the c, so 3 times -10 gives us -30. And then we have to find two values that multiply to -30 and add up to that b value of -1. And what would those two numbers be? It will be -6 and +5. Right? -6 times +5 gives us -30, and then -6 plus 5 gives us -1. So then we take those two numbers, we decompose that middle term into those two numbers. And then from these two, notice we could take out a 3x. Then from these two, we could take out a +5. And as expected, this bracket here should be the same. Factor out that bracket. And what are we left with? 3x plus 5. Right? So this part A here, it factors into x minus 2 times 3x plus 5 like that. Now, if you want, I'm not going to do it for all of these, but if you want to check your answer, remember what's the opposite of factoring? It's expanding. So you could expand this and see if you get that original expression. Notice these are like terms, and notice that you do, right? 3x squared minus x minus 10. So if you do have time on a test, you could quickly check your answer as well. So that ends up being the answer for part A. Now with part B, again, first thing we check for, greatest common factor. Notice 3, 8, 16, no greatest common factor between those. There's no common factor. So let's go into, let's first actually rewrite it here. So first thing we do, check for greatest common factor. Notice that there is none. So let's see if it will factor by decomposition. What's the AC value going to be? 3 times -16 gives us -48. So are there two numbers that multiply to -48 and add up to that B value of 8? And there are two numbers, 12, -4, 12, -4. 12 times -4, -48. 12 plus -4 would be like 12 minus 4, which would give us that B value of +8. So then what we do, decompose, same process, like that. You could switch these up as well. Instead, you could put the -4x and then the +12x right there. So it doesn't really matter the order. Here it's a little trickier with this order because you got to take out a negative since this is going to be negative here. But we've already done tons of questions of where we have to do that. So because this is negative, we take out a negative between the 4 and 16. We could take out a 4 and we'd be left with x plus 4, right? -16 divided by -4 gives us that +4. And then as expected, this bracket should always be the same. If that bracket is not the same, then you know that you made a mistake earlier in the process, right? If you do all of these correctly, get these two numbers correctly, do the correct factoring by grouping, that bracket should always be the same, right? So the answer to part B ends up being that right there. Moving on to part C, so we have 10x squared minus 3x minus 4, like that. And again, first thing we check, greatest common factor between the 10, 3, and 4, no greatest common factor, so let's go into decomposition. And then the AC value will be negative 40, find two numbers that multiply to negative 40, and then add up to that B value of negative 3. The two numbers would be what? Negative 8 and positive 5? Right, negative 8 times 5 gives us negative 40, negative 8 plus 5 gives us negative 3. So then, decomposing, like that. From these two, we could take out a 2x. We'll be left with 5x minus 4. And then between the 5 and the 4, can't take anything out there. So if you can't take anything out, from these, you just take out a positive one. We've done examples like that before. If this was a negative here, then you would take out a negative one, then all the signs would change. In this case, it was a positive, so we just take out a positive one. And then, again, as expected, that bracket is the same. And we end up with 5x minus 4 times 2x plus 1. So that ends up being the answer for part C. So for all of these, basically exact same process that is happening. Now moving on to the last three. So part D, we got negative 35x squared minus 2x plus 1, like that. So first thing we always check, can we take out a greatest common factor? Notice the leading coefficient is negative, so we're definitely going to take out a negative, at least a negative 1. Between the numbers 35, 2, and 1, there's no common factor between those, right? So we're only going to take out a negative 1 in order to let that leading coefficient be positive right there. And so from here, what I would do is now see, can we factor this quadratic over here in the bracket? So don't forget about the negative 1 in front for the main overall problem, but let's see if this bracket can factor further. So notice the A value is 35, the B value is 2, the C value is negative 1, the AC value is negative 35, and then we find two numbers that multiply to negative 35, add up to that B value of 2. And the two numbers would be what? Negative 5 and 7? Negative 5 and 7. Negative 5 times 7 gives us negative 35. Negative 5 plus 7 gives us positive 2. So then decompose that B value like that. From these two, we could take out a 5x, so we'd be left with 7x minus 1. And from these two, we could take out a positive 1. So we're left with a 7x minus 1 as well. Then we could take out the 7x minus 1, and we're left with 5x plus 1 like that, right? But remember, we still have that negative in front, so the overall answer ends up being negative, bracket 7x minus 1, 5x plus 1, like that. Okay, moving on to part E, we got 5x squared minus 2x minus 6, like that. First thing we check, greatest common factor. Notice we can't take out any greatest common factor in this case. So let's see if decomposition works. Multiply the A and the C, that would give us negative 30. Find two numbers that multiply to negative 30, and then add up to that B value of negative 2. And notice in this case, there actually are no numbers that satisfy this, two integers that satisfy this right here, right? No two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add up to negative 2. If this was negative 1, then negative 6 and positive 5 would work. But negative 2, unfortunately, doesn't work. So if you can't find two numbers at this step, it means that factoring is not possible for part E. And then finally, part F, we got negative 8x squared plus 22x plus 6 like that. So notice leading coefficient is negative, so we're definitely going to take out a negative. Between 822 and 6, notice a common factor between those is 2. So we're going to take out a negative 2, so just be careful here with your signs and your algebra. We're dividing all of these by negative 2. So negative 8 divided by negative 2 gives us positive 4. Then we got the x squared. Positive 22 divided by negative 2 gives us negative 11x. Positive 6 divided by negative 2 gives us negative 3, like that. So then, let's see if this quadratic, 4x squared minus 11x minus 3, factors further. So a is 4, b is negative 11, c is negative 3, ac is negative 12. And then let's find two numbers that multiply to negative 12. Add up to that b value of negative 11. So that would be what? Negative 12 positive 1, negative 12 positive 1. Negative 12 times 1 gives us negative 12. Negative 12 plus 1 gives us negative 11. So we'd have 4x squared minus 12x plus x minus 3 like that. From these two, could take out a 4x. Then from these two, could take out a positive 1. And then notice we could take out an x minus 3. And we're left with a 4x plus 1 like that, right? We still have that negative 2 in front for the main overall quadratic, so it factors into negative 2 bracket, these two brackets here, x minus 3, 4x plus 1 like that, right? And as usual, if you wanted to, you can expand, check your answer. All right, so same process for all of these. First, see if you could take out a greatest common factor. After you do that, see if it factors by decomposition.